Ria and Zane had heard the rumors about the old forest road, but neither believed the ghost stories until they found themselves trapped in a nightmare where the past refused to let go, and the shadows were far more real than they ever imagined. It was a chilly autumn evening when I decided to take a shortcut home through an old road I had heard stories about but never dared to drive before. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a deep, heavy shade of blue that seemed to swallow everything around it. The road was narrow and winding, cutting through a thick forest that lined both sides like silent sentinels. There were no streetlights, no signs of life, only the faint glow of my car's headlights piercing the darkness. I had taken this route hoping to save time, but almost immediately after turning onto it, I felt an unsettling weight settle on my chest. The trees on either side leaned inward, their twisted branches scratching at the sky, casting strange shadows that danced in the corners of my vision. The wind whispered softly, rustling dry leaves along the ground, but there was an eerie silence beneath it all, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. As I drove cautiously, the headlights suddenly caught something moving across the road ahead. I slammed on the brakes, my heart jumping into my throat. For a moment, the only thing visible was the empty stretch of pavement. Then, just beyond the reach of the headlights, a figure appeared, a woman standing perfectly still, right in the middle of the road. She was wearing a long white dress that looked old and faded, stained with dirt or something darker. Her hair hung limp around her pale face, and even in the dim light, I could see that her eyes were hollow, almost like empty wells. I froze, gripping the steering wheel as a cold dread settled over me. I blinked, and suddenly she was gone, vanished into the darkness like a ghost. But what chilled me more was what I saw next. Behind my car, fresh footprints appeared in the dirt shoulder of the road. I looked back in the side mirror, expecting to see someone running after me, but there was nothing, only the still night and the trees. The footprints were too neat, too deliberate, as if someone had been walking beside me for miles without making a sound. My pulse quickened, and I forced myself to move forward, my eyes scanning every shadow, every tree line. The silence around me felt unnatural, broken only by the faint hum of my engine and the occasional crack of a twig snapping somewhere nearby. Suddenly, my radio, which had been off, burst to life with static. A soft melody began to play, a lullaby, faint but unmistakable. The music was haunting, filled with a sadness that pressed down on my chest. I reached to turn it off, but the volume grew louder, filling the car with a cold, spectral presence. It felt like the sound was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, wrapping around me like a shroud. And then, through the melody, I heard something else, a whisper. It was barely audible, like the wind carrying a secret, but I could make out a single word, my name. It sent a jolt of fear through me, sharp and cold. My hands trembled as I gripped the wheel tighter, desperate to escape this nightmare road. The trees seemed to close in tighter, their branches scraping the roof of my car like fingers trying to pull me back. The shadows outside the windows flickered and twisted, playing tricks on my eyes. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, but my body was frozen, trapped between fear and the unknown. Then, as if the road itself was alive, a sudden chill swept through the car, and the temperature dropped so fast my breath fogged the windshield. I glanced up into the rearview mirror, and for the briefest moment, I saw her, the woman in white, sitting silently in the back seat, her empty eyes staring straight at me. My heart slammed against my ribs as I spun around. The back seat was empty. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, desperate to put distance between myself and whatever haunted this place. The lullaby faded into static, and the footprints behind me vanished, as if they had never been there. The road stretched on endlessly, the trees blurring past, but I dared not look back again. Even now, whenever I close my eyes, I see that woman's pale face and feel the icy grip of her presence. The road is waiting, and I know that someday it will call me back again. The morning after that terrifying night, I woke up feeling like I hadn't really slept at all. My mind was still tangled in the shadows of that haunted road. The woman in white burned into my thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, even inside the safety of my own home. The memory of those empty eyes staring from the back seat sent shivers down my spine every time I closed my eyes. Despite the fear gnawing at me, a strange curiosity pulled me back toward the road. I needed to know more. What was the story behind that place? I spent the day asking around, trying to piece together anything that might explain what I had seen. Most people avoided the topic, casting nervous glances and shaking their heads, but eventually an old man at a gas station near the town's edge shared a chilling tale. He told me that many years ago a young woman had disappeared on that very road. She had been wearing a white dress, just like the one I saw, and was said to have been waiting for someone to pick her up. She never made it home. The road had a dark reputation, whispered about in hushed voices. People claimed her spirit was trapped there, wandering endlessly, searching for a ride that would never come. Some even said she appeared to drivers, her pale figure haunting the night, forever lost between this world and the next. I tried to dismiss it as just a story, a ghost tale to scare kids and lonely travelers, but deep down, I felt the weight of those words pressing down on me. What if it was true? What if that woman was more than just a shadow? That afternoon I decided to visit the road again, but this time during daylight. I hoped the sun's bright light would chase away the dark feelings and reveal the place for what it really was. As I drove back toward the old path, the trees looked less menacing under the sun's warm glow. The road was cracked and worn, overgrown in places, but it seemed almost normal. Yet as soon as I stepped out of the car, a chill ran through me, colder than the autumn air should have been. The forest around the road was unnervingly still. No birds sang, no breeze rustled the leaves. It was as if the entire place was holding its breath, waiting. I wandered a short distance along the path, trying to ignore the heavy silence that seemed to press in on me from all sides. Then I saw something half buried in the dirt near the edge of the road, an old rusted locket. It looked ancient, stained with years of grime. My fingers trembled as I picked it up and carefully opened it. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman, her face soft and delicate but marked with a strange sadness. My breath caught. It was the same woman from the stories, the woman I had seen the night before. Suddenly, from behind me, I heard the faint crunch of footsteps on dry leaves. My heart leapt. I whipped around, eyes scanning the trees, but no one was there. The footsteps continued, slow and steady, as if someone was walking just out of sight, keeping pace with me. Panic surged through me, and I broke into a run back to my car. When I slammed the door shut, I glanced down in horror. The locket was gone, vanished from my hand without a trace. Outside, the footsteps stopped. I pressed my back against the seat, breathing heavily, but the heavy silence remained. I didn't stay long that day. Driving away, I couldn't escape the feeling that the road was alive, watching, waiting. The woman wasn't just a ghost story anymore. She was real, and somehow, she had reached out to me. That night, sleep was impossible. Every shadow in my room seemed to twist into her shape. Every sound carried the whisper of those footsteps. I knew I hadn't seen the last of her, and the road was calling me back, deeper into its dark secret. That night, my dreams were filled with shadows and whispers. The woman in white appeared again, clearer than before. Her face was still pale, but her eyes were no longer empty. They held a desperate sorrow that seemed to reach out for something, or someone. I couldn't hear her voice, but I felt her silent plea pressing into my mind like a cold wind. I woke up gasping, my heart pounding, and there on my bedside table was the locket, the same rusted one I had found on the road. I stared at it in disbelief, my hands shaking. How had it gotten there? I had left it behind on the road. I didn't remember bringing it home. A chill ran through me, and the room felt suddenly colder. The next day, despite the fear that clung to my skin like a second layer, I couldn't resist the pull of the road. I grabbed a small camera, determined to capture whatever haunted that place. Maybe if I could see it, understand it, I could finally break free from the nightmare. The whispers returned, soft and urgent, flooding my mind with words I couldn't understand. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. The hands tightened, and I realized with horror that I was no longer alone on this road. Something invisible surrounded me, closing in from every side. I struggled to break free, but the grip held fast. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pressure released. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, eyes wild with fear. When I looked up, the clearing was empty again. No sign of the woman, no sign of the presence that had held me. Shaken and breathless, I crawled back to my feet and hurried down the road. The trees seemed to watch me, their twisted branches like accusing fingers. I didn't stop until the edge of the forest opened onto the highway, where the warm glow of streetlights felt like a lifeline. But even in the safety of the town, I knew the road hadn't let me go. It was waiting, patient and hungry. And somewhere out there, in the darkness between the trees, the woman in white still wandered, searching, calling, trapped in an endless nightmare. After that night in the clearing, I tried harder than ever to forget the road, to leave it buried deep in my mind where it couldn't reach me. But the more I fought it, the stronger the pull became. The woman in white wasn't just a ghost story anymore. She was a dark presence that had rooted itself inside me. I felt it whenever I was alone, like cold fingers trailing over my skin, a whisper brushing against my ear. Then, one evening, as I was scrolling through my phone in an attempt to distract myself, a message popped up from an unknown number. There was no text, only a photo. My heart stopped when I saw the image. It was the entrance to the haunted road, taken just minutes ago, and standing right in the middle of the road was the woman in white, her figure illuminated by a dim, flickering streetlight. But what froze me wasn't just her presence. It was the sign she held in her hands, a crudely written message scrawled in black letters that dripped like ink, spelling out my name. I stared at the photo, disbelief and terror twisting inside me. I tried to call the number back, but the line was dead. I showed the image to friends, but no one else could see it. It was like the message existed only for me, a private warning or invitation. Days passed and the messages continued. Each one showed the same haunting figure, standing closer and closer to the edge of the road, always holding that sign with my name. The sense of being watched, hunted, grew unbearable. I felt like a prisoner caught in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. One night my phone rang. The caller ID was blank. I hesitated but answered, the line crackling with static. Then came a whisper, low, cold, and filled with menace, but I couldn't make out the words. My blood ran cold. I dropped the phone and ran to the window, looking out toward the road. In the distance, headlights flickered, cutting through the darkness like searching eyes. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and stepped outside. The night air was thick and heavy, the fog rolling in like a living thing. Drawn by a force I couldn't resist, I walked to the edge of town, where the road began. The headlights were closer now, shining dimly through the mist. I hesitated, heart pounding, but a strange compulsion pushed me forward. I stepped onto the road. The car approached slowly, its engine barely making a sound. As it passed, I caught a glimpse of the driver in the rearview mirror, a pale woman in white, her hollow eyes locked on mine. The car stopped beside me. The door creaked open. I felt the cold grip of unseen hands pulling me inside, the warmth of the world fading away. When I opened my eyes again, I was sitting in the back seat. The headlights flickered on that endless road, stretching out before me like a black ribbon disappearing into the fog. The woman sat silently beside me, her gaze empty and unblinking. I realized then I was trapped, just like her. A passenger forever lost on the haunted road, waiting for someone else to come along to take my place. And somewhere, in the distance, the headlights of another car began to glow, inching closer through the night. The road was still waiting, and I was never coming back. I was driving back as the sun was setting, painting the sky with dark purples and reds. The trees on both sides seemed to lean in, their branches like twisted arms reaching out to grab me. When I stopped at the road's entrance, a thick fog was already creeping in, covering the path ahead with a cold white mist. I stepped out of the car. The air felt heavy and damp. It was almost too quiet only. The soft crunch of my boots on the gravel broke the silence. I turned on my camera's light, which cut a small beam through the fog. As I moved forward, I heard a soft whisper carried by the wind. At first I thought it was just leaves rustling, but the whispers grew louder. They turned into many voices overlapping, like distant people talking all at once. The voices seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing all around me. My breath caught in my throat when a figure appeared ahead, blocking my way. It was the woman in white. Her dress was torn and fluttered in the breeze. Her face was different. Now her hollow eyes were replaced by cold, burning ones. She stared at me without blinking, her gaze sharp and piercing. I raised my camera, hoping to capture proof, but the screen suddenly went black. The light flickered and died, leaving me almost completely in the dark. Panic filled me as the whispers changed into a loud, terrible scream that surrounded me, pressing against my ears and twisting my thoughts. I dropped the camera and ran blindly through the fog. Branches scraped against my skin as I ran. When I finally reached the clearing near my car, my lungs burned and my heart pounded hard. I grabbed the camera and turned it on, hoping to see what had happened. The screen was cracked, lines spreading like spiderwebs across the glass, but the footage still played. At first it showed only darkness. Then suddenly, a pale hand reached into the frame, fingers curling around the lens with an icy grip. I gasped and shut the camera off. Without thinking, I threw the camera into the passenger seat, locked the doors, and started the car with shaking hands. As I drove away, the fog seemed to follow me, swirling around my headlights and lingering in the rearview mirror. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see that hand reaching for me. The road wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it was hungry. Something was waiting there for me, something I couldn't escape. The days after that night passed in a blur, but the fear didn't go away. Instead, it got heavier, pressing down on my chest every time I tried to breathe. The woman in white wasn't just a shadow anymore. She was a dark force inside my mind, haunting every moment. I couldn't sleep without seeing her hollow eyes, couldn't go anywhere without feeling a cold touch on my skin. Still, I felt pulled back to that cursed road, like it was daring me to discover its secrets. One evening, as the sky darkened, I found myself standing at the road's entrance again. This time, I decided to walk down it. The car and the camera didn't matter anymore. I needed to face the darkness at its heart. The air was thick and still, broken only by the soft rustling of dry leaves. The trees leaned closer, their branches weaving together above to block out the last light. As I walked deeper, the temperature dropped sharply. A heavy silence wrapped around me like a thick blanket. Each step felt harder than the last, like the road didn't want me there. After a few minutes, I reached a small clearing where the ground was bare. In the middle lay a broken mirror. Its glass was cracked and jagged like ice. The frame was old and covered in moss and dirt, but something about it drew me in. I bent down and picked it up, my fingers shaking. When I looked into the broken glass, my reflection wavered and twisted. The image blurred and changed until I no longer saw myself. Instead, the woman in white appeared. Her lips moved silently, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Her eyes burned with cold fire that froze me in place. A sudden noise pulled me out of the trance. Slow, careful footsteps circled the clearing. I spun around, but no one was there. The silence returned, heavier and more suffocating than before. Then, I felt it, cold hands gripping my shoulders, pressing down hard. My breath caught and panic flooded my chest.